In business today, three things to know. First, the economy rebounds with 4% second quarter GDP growth. What's behind the numbers, and will raising interest rates now be a slam dunk for the Fed? Then, inside the mind of Vladimir Putin, the Russian president tells his government be prepared to go it alone in key economic areas. And does the NFL have a woman problem? 55% of American women watch football, but now the league is getting hammered for a light suspension of a player who allegedly beat his girlfriend. Could that turn away female fans? Arise Exchange starts now. Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Schmertz. The U.S. Federal Reserve stuck to its game plan Wednesday, keeping interest rates low, even as the economy showed a significant rebound and some data showed inflation creeping up. This afternoon, Janet Yellen and the group said it would stay the course in its ultra-easy monetary policy. It is the gross domestic product number, however, that grabbed the attention. A first look at the second quarter GDP showed the U.S. economy grew at an annual rate of 4%, a full percent better than some analysts expected, though not our first guest, who we'll speak to in a moment. That is a turnaround from the first quarter when GDP shrunk better than 2%. Sensing the Fed is in no hurry to raise rates, the markets turned around some early losses late in the day. Here are the final numbers. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closing down 31 points to 16,880. The S&P 500 up just 12 cents to 1970, and the Nasdaq up 20 to 44.62. Corporate earnings season is still underway, and we have some more companies that we're keeping an eye on. Oil and natural gas company Hess reporting earnings that beat analyst estimates. The company said quarterly earnings fell by 9% to $1.38 a share. Revenue this quarter of $3.6 billion, however, beat forecasts by nearly $1 billion. Hess also announced it would launch an IPO for its assets in the Bakken shale oil fields in early 2015. Hess closing up $1.63 to $101.05. SodaStream, second quarter earnings per share of 43 cents beat estimates, revenue coming in at $141.2 million. That also topped expectations. SodaStream closing up $2.99 to $32.76. Family Dollar may have taken his advice and put itself up for sale, but Carl Icahn is decreasing his stake in the company. Icahn disclosed a filing dropping his stake in the discount chain by about a third to 6% of the company. Family Dollar closing up 65 cents. And a look at commodities. Gold down $2.30 and oil pulling back below $100 a barrel. For more on the GDP and the Fed's decision, we turn to Howard Rosenkrantz. He is Chief Research Analyst with Value Advisory. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you for having me.
As we mentioned, GDP number 4%, very strong. You got it right on this program just a few weeks ago. How did we hit the number, and is it sustainable?
Consumers getting better. Jobs are out there. The whole environment, I believe, has changed dramatically. It was held back this winter by some horrific winter. You've had pent-up demand, and you've had a steady stream of reduction in the unemployment rate. And now employers are beginning to get nervous. They're beginning to step up more aggressively. They're stopping all the CapEx spend. We've already seen all the productivity come out, or we've already achieved all the productivity gains we can. Now you got to add to your workforce, and soon you got to start paying them more.
I was about to say, does that then follow that we're going to start finally getting some real wage increases?
You certainly are. I believe that's one of the things that the Fed has focused foremost on is the absence of wage inflation to date. But I think in the ensuing months, really this summer, it's going to begin where you're going to start to see it. Another one of the impetuses to get Fed to move off ZIRP.
And to basically start raising interest rates.
Yes.
We'll get to that in a moment. And Americans don't save money when they get raises, do they? They go shopping.
Americans are pretty good.
We're already seeing consumer debt go up.
They're pretty good at spending, and they're going to continue to be, and I don't see that changing, particularly since they're feeling better about their jobs, their house is worth more, and rates continue to stay low.
I asked this question yesterday. Even though they're feeling better about a lot of things here, are they just not concerned with the world at large right now?
I think with this president in place, and you can decide whether our policy is good or bad, but we're not going to get involved. And I think the public is a big fan of that, and I don't think they're going to concern themselves with what's going on in these in the far-off lands. The only place they're going to notice it is really at the pump. Whether we should be or shouldn't be more concerned is not material at this
whether
point.
Oil prices go up, and we really haven't seen that just yet right now. So the Fed came out, and I'm wondering, I take it they have this information before the rest of the public goes, right? They have some of this information. They come out, and nothing has changed, at least publicly, though we are hearing behind the scenes, certainly, some grumbling among certainly some hawks.
You've had some Fed hawks who are a lot more visible than they were in the past.
Absolutely.
There was a Wall Street Journal editorial the other day talking about how we need to get out and we need to get out sooner. So QE, we know, is ending in October. And then the question is when, not if. That's basically completely off the table. If it wasn't off the table before today, it is now. There's going to have to be some real exogenous event that would change the direction. But I think you're going to see a steady stream up in the short-term rate. However, if you go on the other side, you still see the 10-year at 255. So you really haven't seen any move there. Now, there's a couple of important factors that are influencing that. First of all, you've got these horrible sovereigns in Europe, which for some unbeknownst, it's certainly not justifiable in my mind reason, you've still got rates very low over there. When you got 3% rates in really horrible countries between not bad people, but between France, Italy, and Spain, when you've got really, Spain seems to be bouncing. When you've got really challenged economies, and they are paying 3%, and the world will pay 3% or lend at 3%, then how can we be? Then how can we be higher?
Against that?
Also, the other side is that the fiscal deficit, which is really an under-the-radar story. The deficits are down very dramatically. Just a few years ago, well, I guess 4 or 5, but they've still been pretty high since. We were running at 10% of GDP deficit. Now, this year, we're going to run closer to a 3%. So the fiscal needs, the public borrowing is substantially reduced, putting less pressure on rates.
Yeah, so certainly the deficit is coming down. But do you now believe, or do you still believe we're going to see interest rates before the end of the year? And why won't the Fed say so?
I don't think the timing is going to be before the end of the year. Okay. I think consensus calls for March-ish, and I'm consistent with consensus in that regard. The question will be what the elevation is from when we start in March.
And the question, though, is because we have some inflationary pressures out there that keep kind of dribbling in. Are the hawks right to some extent that the Fed could get really behind this and that, too loose, too long, which was the op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal? And then what's the impact of that?
I'm certainly in that camp, and I think the Fed is going to become increasingly hawkish. What's really interesting is what Yellen is saying. All of a sudden, she's actually talking about stock valuation. She doesn't want to be caught and look like a jackass, like Greenspan did.
Just throw it out there.
Know what we can say and what we can't.
That's okay.
That's the reality of it. And she's talking about raising margin requirements, which is exactly what I was a huge proponent of and exactly what Greenspan never did. And she specifically cited social media and biotech.
You think she's getting this right for now?
We'll see. The rhetoric is moving in the right direction,
okay.
Yes.
Okay, Howard Rosenkranz, Chief Research Analyst with Value Advisory. Thank you.
Thank you.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has met with members of his government to urge them to adopt a go-it-alone policy when it comes to arms production and oil services material. This comes as Europe has issued the toughest sanctions to date over the crisis in Ukraine. Today's New York Times reports Russian business leaders are growing concerned over increased isolationism and the anti-West rhetoric in the Russian media, which could cost them some business. Bill Courtney is the former U.S. ambassador to Kazakhstan and Georgia and former special assistant to President Clinton. He's a frequent contributor here on Arise, and we welcome you back to the show, Bill.
Thank you.
Okay, so there is starting to be at least some dribbles of news reports that Vladimir Putin's sort of what me worry, master of the universe facade is starting to crack a little bit. Do you think there's any validity to it?
I think his main purpose in doing that is to reassure a domestic audience rather than international audience that the economic privations that are going to occur because of these international sanctions are not going to have a major impact on the personal quality of life of individuals there. But a lot of people in Russia will likely be surprised that Europe and America acted together, and I think the business community especially is worried about that.
And there is some cracks in the government. I think his former foreign minister has sort of publicly expressed some concern, and so wondering if the rise of dissent is starting to take notice in Russia.
Yes, former Finance Minister Alexei Kudrin, who is regarded as a liberal internationalist, he has expressed concern that the impact on Russia's economy could be significant. Because remember, investors are very long-term focused people, not the portfolio investors, but the direct investors. And so an interruption now, for example, something with Rosneft, which has a big deal with ExxonMobil, if something happens now that creates uncertainty, that can have a very long-term impact on the willingness of international investors to make 40-year investments in energy, for example, in Russia.
And so, Putin has been saying that Russia has to be more independent, specifically in the two areas that we mentioned at the top of this story. Is he sort of kind of rallying the nationalistic base there, or is he being practical, and is he also being a little bit too late to the game? Maybe he should have thought about this before his adventure into Ukraine.
Well, he definitely should have thought about that before they started interfering in eastern Ukraine. The Crimea was a success. It was a bloodless coup. Russia had tactical and strategic surprise in achieving that. If Putin had stopped there, he would have been widely regarded as a hero, what they call a gatherer of the lands in Russia. But he went on to eastern Ukraine, where the eastern Ukrainians actually weren't all that interested in being part of Russia. So his rebels, his GRU, Russian military intelligence folks over there, have not been able to arouse popular support. So this has become a morass, made worse, of course, by the shooting down of the Malaysian airliner. So Putin is in trouble now. The nationalists are pushing him to be tough in eastern Ukraine. The business community is pushing back a little bit on that. And Putin doesn't seem to know exactly which way to go right now.
Yeah, and there was an article about how Russians love to play chess. There's a time in chess where whatever move you make, you sort of lose, and they're talking about that a little bit. You had been critical of President Obama previously in some of the things he said. If you take what he said yesterday and the sanctions the U.S. put in place, plus the European sanctions, what are your thoughts of those new stepped-up measures?
Well, I think the fact that the U.S. and Europe did them together is good, and President Obama deserves a lot of credit for working with the Europeans and helping to persuade and egg them on a little bit to take tougher measures. The sanctions themselves, though, are not going to be strong enough. They're not going to have that much of an impact on the economy. The Russians had a far greater dip in economic performance in the 1990s, shortly after they became independent. So they can suffer. And they won't overthrow the government if GDP goes down a few percentage points. The problem for Putin will be if Russians think that what he has done now in getting both Europe and America to sanction Russia is humiliating Russia. Mm-hmm. And if Russians think that, and if Russians think that Putin really doesn't know how to deal with the big powers, the great powers, both of those factors, then that could be more trouble for Putin maybe than actual couple percentage point drops in the GDP.
So more humiliation than economic distress. Bill Courtney, thank you so much.
You're quite welcome.
Coming up, a multi-billion-dollar verdict against a tobacco company and why no one may ever see a dime. You're watching Arise Exchange. Last week on Arise Exchange, is it economic treason to move headquarters for better tax treatment?
This is about enabling American companies to compete on a level playing field.
We all like to post photos of ourselves on Facebook. Perhaps it's best not to post a picture of yourself wearing the dress you stole. Me worry? That is the message from the U.S. stock market as global tensions are overshadowed.
Yes, headline on Ukraine, but where's it going to fall to the bottom line?
Watch this week for more. Arise Exchange.
Mainstream news has covered all of the issues of the world, which are like this, through a very narrow lens. And at Arise News, we do things different. We cover every culture, every angle. Our mission is to go to these places, to these communities, whether they're in Africa, whether they're in Europe, Asia, the United States, the Caribbean. And we're going to find these stories, and we're going to tell them to our audience. Stories that they probably never heard of before, and stories that they'll find interesting and engaging.
Time now for our business ticker stories making headlines across the nation and the world. Hyundai is the latest automaker to be bitten by the recall bug. The company announcing it is recalling more than 100,000 Sonata mid-size sedans over faulty gear shifts. Soon there won't be any cars on the road at all. The recall covers cars from 2011 through 2014 model years. Fortunately, Hyundai reports no accidents or crashes as a result of the defect. Netflix has scored yet another deal to ensure faster download speeds for its customers. The company teaming up with AT&T, which will allow direct access to AT&T's broadband services. Netflix signed similar deals with Comcast and Verizon earlier this year. It's a simple fraud, but it worked well enough to allow a Florida man to steal nearly $310,000 from Apple. Police say Sharon Parrish would go to Apple stores where he attempted to use a debit card that would be declined. Parrish would then pretend to call his bank and get a bogus code that the store could use to override the payment terminal. This would allow the sale to go through. Due to a flaw in credit card processing, the numbers didn't have to be real. Any code will do, and no matter what the right digits are. The scammer allegedly did this 42 times in 16 different states until he got caught. And women, listen up. The next time you go on vacation, you may be interested in hiring a manservant to attend to all of your needs while relaxing by the pool. Well, almost all of your needs. A new startup is the brainchild of two advertising executives who say manservants turn men into dates and on-demand cabana boys who make great accessories, quote unquote, for a day. Each manservant will cost you about $80 an hour, and the founders insist all manservants must obey a code of conduct and keep their hands to themselves. Last week, a Florida jury awarded more than $23 billion to the widow of a man who died in 1996 after smoking cigarettes manufactured by R.J. Reynolds. Big-ticket suits against tobacco, nothing new. But the industry almost always wins in the end. So who's really footing the bill, and who do these suits make a difference for? For that answer, we turn to Adam Thompson. He's a criminal and civil attorney who has studied the cases here in New York. Adam, welcome to Arise Xchange.
Thanks for having me on.
I am baffled by why anybody who voluntarily smokes for years and years and years gets to even sue them. And I'm not a fan of tobacco at all, but explain to me the legal theory that allows these cases to go forward.
The big issue with these tobacco cases are, and you make a great point, because nowadays it's so prevalent everywhere what the warnings are. Anyone that could really argue that they didn't know that you can get addicted to tobacco and that it has a harmful effect on you, you have to be living under a rock.
Sure.
A lot of these cases stem from many years ago. Like the case we're looking at today, this goes back to the early 90s when the case was brought, about stuff that took place years ago in the 60s, early 70s, when it wasn't that prevalent.
And that the tobacco companies intentionally put the substances in there to make you addicted.
They weren't telling you.
And they knew that these things were bad.
They concealed it. They didn't let you know what harmful stuff was in there and how addictive it was.
Okay, but $23 billion.
Been there, done that. It's happened a lot of times. There was.
This is a statement, right? It's not a verdict. It's a statement.
It's a statement from the jury saying that they really don't like what tobacco does to people, and that big companies that are making so much money conceal what it's doing to people.
Okay, now, tobacco companies aren't going to settle, right? They don't have a history of settling on individual cases?
No, they do. It happens very rarely. If you look at the line of cases, 50% of them really settle or get dismissed under 50 grand. A lot of them just disappear. The other ones, you see verdicts on, and usually they're substantial. But they always get appealed, and after the appeals go down, they always get overturned. Doesn't mean they don't pay anything. Mm-hmm. Like there was a huge award of, I believe, $125 billion, but it got reduced to $28 million. $28 million is still a lot of money, but it's not $128 billion.
Was that to an individual or a class?
That was actually an individual case out of Los Angeles going back to early 2000.
Okay, so why do the lawyers take these cases, if I could ask? If they get turned over and if at the end of the day this $23 billion becomes $50,000, that doesn't sound like a good incentive for attorneys.
Well, I mean, one case that went from several billion down to $28 million.
We'll take that.
And, you know, no attorney's turning that down. Plus the publicity that you're fighting on a good cause for the public, that you're fighting the big guy for the little guy. That's always a good marketing tool as an attorney.
Okay, so what is the next step here for this person who sued and for the tobacco company? They're going to go to appeals?
There'll be an appeals. The overall, you know, this stems from something. She even got to sue because it went back to a case in 2006 where there was a $145 billion verdict, but it was a class action. That got overturned. They broke it down now into individual actions. She now gets this huge sum for one person, $26 billion in punitives. It's going to be appealed. It's going to get reduced. If she sees 15, 20 million, that'll probably be a good day for her.
Do you think that all these lawsuits against tobacco companies at the end of the day have been good for tobacco companies? Because basically, they're off the hook now, right? If you start smoking today, Could you really sue them 40 years from now or so?
It's going to be hard. Listen, there's always ways to bring lawsuits. So, you know, the mouse gets smarter as the mousetraps change. So it's going to be the same thing. They'll come up with a new way of instituting lawsuits. But this day and age with the internet, TV shows that discuss it like this program.
But I'll tell you
how do you claim ignorance?
Well, here's where the next risk maybe for the tobacco industry is not in the U.S. and not in Europe, but maybe in Asia, where the regulations have been a lot less and where smoking, from what I understand, is either flat or on the rise.
No, that's a very good point. So we can see international cases being brought, but they always worry about their base here because this is where it all originates from. This is where they already took the bad press. But people read and go on the internet, so that bad press is going to carry internationally, too.
Okay. Adam Thompson, criminal and civil attorney here in New York. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure.
Good information. Ahead, which is worse, a teenage girl with a cell phone or the devil with a cell phone? The answer is in our favorite person of the day. Next, you're watching Rise Exchange.
Looking at mainstream news stations where only you have a very small minority of people of color being newscasters and actually having prominent roles in the media.
In a newsroom in the United States, maybe 10% of decision makers come from communities of diversity. That's not right.
Well, diversity is important because the more complete the news is, the more accurate a picture you're getting of the world, and the more you can form an accurate opinion of things.
The vision here is not just to tell the main stories of the day, but to tell the news that other organizations don't tell, and tell it in a way that people like me, people that look like me, that look like you, are interested in.
Arise News.
Arise News.
Arise News.
Arise News.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Time now for our favorite person of the day when we pick one person who grabbed our attention, not for the right reasons. Today, it is a priest who claims he is getting text messages from the devil. Father Marian Rochelle from Poland says he started getting text messages from Satan after he performed an exorcism on a teenage girl. Apparently, the exorcism didn't go so well because the good priest claims the devil has taken possession of the girl's cell phone. The only thing worse than a teenage girl with a cell phone is a devil with a cell phone, though maybe some people disagree with that. Among the texts Father Rochelle now gets, quote, "She will not come out of this hell, she's mine." So that's my devil impersonation. "And anyone who tries will die." Another text, when the devil said, "Shut up, preacher, you cannot save yourself, idiot, you pathetic old man." The father claims the devil is quite good at using mobile phones, and the messages, get this, kept coming. Clearly, the devil has an unlimited text messaging plan. And so, Father Marian Rochelle is our favorite person of the day. Coming up, the NFL and what may be a problem for one of their biggest constituencies. Coming up.
If I was building my own news network, first thing I think I'd want high-quality reporters, very educated, intelligent people.
Hello, I'm Francesca Maxime.
I'm Julian Phillips.
I'm Wendy Gillette.
I'm Sophia Songhai.
I'm Gary Anthony Ramsey. Thank you for joining us here in New York City.
I would like to see more people of color represented in high positions in media.
We've got world-class journalists, veteran journalists who have been in this industry for decades, not just in front of the camera, but behind the scenes as well.
People need to understand the problems that are going on in the community are much closer than we actually think they are.
Kayla Phillips is one of the shoppers who is suing Barney's, and she is here with her attorney. What is it that you want from them?
Not to judge every African-American person that comes in your store.
The National Football League and its commissioner, Roger Goodell, are under fire after one of its star players received a slap on the wrist for a domestic violence incident. The NFL suspended Baltimore Ravens running back Ray Rice for 2 games and fined him $58,000 for getting into an altercation with his then-girlfriend and now wife that left her unconscious. In light of this incident, the league is being accused of being insensitive and turning a blind eye when it comes to women and domestic violence. Arise sports contributor Andrew Rosario joins us now with more. Andrew, The Onion had a good headline which says Roger Goodell issues 4-game suspension for player who murdered his wife. That's basically what this is coming down to, is they get longer suspensions for pot possession.
Correct.
A owner of the LA Clippers was thrown out of the entire league and forced to sell his team for racist comments. Yet you look at this and you beat your girlfriend and you walked away with a 2-game suspension. What was going through Roger Goodell's mind?
You know, that's the very biggest question everyone's asking. Why only 2 games, especially given the video that surfaced of the event? From what I'm hearing, when they sat down, when Ray Rice and his then fiance sat down with Roger Goodell, they basically convinced him that it was sort of a mutual attack.
But anybody, and prosecutors will tell you this all the time, when you're interviewing victims of domestic violence, usually women, they often defend the man.
Right. Well, apparently there is video that has yet to surface from what actually happened in the elevator that Roger Goodell saw, she admitted to. But the bottom line is this. It happened. No matter what she did to him, the result was a lot worse than what happened to her. And given the fact that the commissioner, since he's been in charge, has been the judge, jury, and executioner, you look what he did with the New Orleans Saints, with Bountygate, and what he's done with other players, suspending them for as much as a year for either PED violations, DWI, DUI. One player actually was convicted of vehicle manslaughter. And that's why a lot of people are scratching their head and saying, if you're coming down that hard on those players,
it's possible then that he did look at the totality of the evidence, like you said, and said there's some sort of mitigating factors, whatever that might be, but maybe didn't get the best counsel on how this would look publicly.
Exactly.
Though I don't know what the mitigating factors could honestly be.
Right, I don't know.
That's really the problem. And then you have Stephen A. Smith on ESPN getting a longer suspension. Right. For the ESPN didn't waste any time here.
No, not at all.
And was his suspension valid?
A lot of people say yes, and a lot of people say no. I understood what he was trying to say. Is just the way he said it. It almost made it seem like he was giving Ray Rice an excuse for doing what he did to his wife at that time. And I don't believe that should be the case. I figured he would get at least 4 games and fined more than he did. Now,
is there any component to this, by the way, of some sort of public service component that may have made this look a little bit better?
It might have.
Something else that could show that you're actually...
Yeah, he's been taking they've both been taking counseling classes, to deal with their situation. But what I'm more surprised at is this. When this fine came down, the fine was based on his 2013 salary, which was only $1 million, except his salary for 2014 is more than $4 million. So fining him on that 2013 salary...
nominal amount.
Right, a very nominal amount.
So what are you hearing about the reaction from female fans? What the NFL has a growing base...
Yes, they do.
...of very influential and very rabid female fans. Is this going to seriously impact it?
I don't think it's going to seriously impact it, but it will have a little bit of an effect. The female fan base right now is anywhere between 35 and 45% of the league, and it's gotten so popular that in the off season, women are taking NFL classes being taught by ex-players and broadcasters, so that when the season begins, they have a better understanding of what they're watching, what the game means to them, and how much more they can enjoy it.
Yeah, it used to be that women would watch it with their husbands or boyfriends.
Exactly.
But now if you go to the games, some of the most rabid fans are females.
That's right.
And the NFL has to be cognizant of it. And I got to believe Roger Goodell knows that.
I'm sure he does know it.
Do you think in less than a minute that we have left, you say Roger Goodell is sort of the jury, the judge, the executioner, and that's often the case in sports leagues. Does that need to change a little bit in these kind of cases? When you're dealing with violence and criminal activity, maybe you need to have like an independent tribunal?
Yeah, I think what you're going to see in the future is you're going to have more involvement from the Players Association. You're probably going to have an arbitrator or two to step in to determine whether or not the decision that he makes is a valid decision, and rightfully so, because in the course of the New Orleans Saints, he did hire Paul Tagliabue, the former commissioner, and he reduced the sentences of a lot of the players and management that Goodell fined and suspended.
This sentence, less than 10 seconds left, this sentence can't be revisited.
No, he decided, Ray Rice says, I'm not going to appeal it.
Okay, Andrew Rosario, thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrew.
Tomorrow on the Rise Exchange, why more and more companies are demanding employees bring their own devices to the workplace. And could your company be next? Let's take a look at the markets once again. After the Fed basically said the course stays the same on interest rates, Dow Jones Industrial Average down 31.75, S&P 500, NASDAQ slightly up. I'm Andrew Schmertz. Thanks for watching the Rise Exchange.